It was a typical Wednesday morning when everything fell apart. Miriam Hawkins, a 68-year-old retired forensic accountant, stood at the checkout counter in the local grocery store, her hands shaking slightly as she swiped her debit card for the third time. The soft beeping noise rang out as the cashier's polite smile began to fade into something resembling pity. "Sorry, ma'am," the cashier said, glancing up at her. "Do you have another card or form of payment?" Miriam's heart sank as she pulled out another card from her worn leather wallet, praying this time would be different. Her granddaughter, Ivy, clutched the crumpled lunch money she had left in her pocket, her 2 $1 bills barely enough to cover a snack. Miriam placed the second card in the reader, holding her breath. "Declined," the machine chirped back just like the first. "Mom, it's okay," Ivy said softly, her voice laced with concern. "We can just—" "No," Miriam interrupted, forcing a smile as she tried to cover the growing panic in her chest. "I've got this. Let me try one more thing." She tried the third card. It too was declined. The cashier, a young woman with a nervous glance, offered a gentle, "I'm really sorry, ma'am." Miriam felt a cold sweat break out along the back of her neck. Something wasn't right. I must have made a mistake," she said, fumbling through her cards, trying to hide her confusion. "There must be an issue with the account. Let me just go to the ATM down the street." Ivy gave her a concerned look. "Grandma, it's okay. We can just walk home. I have my lunch money." Ivy's face, usually full of the careless innocence of a 14-year-old, looked worried now. She must have sensed it, too. The tension that was rising in Miriam's chest, the unease in her gut. As they walked out of the store, Miriam's mind raced. She could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on her. How could all her cards be rejected? She had been careful with her finances, especially after retirement. There was no reason this should happen. But when they reached the ATM, the truth hit hard. Her PIN was accepted, but when the screen flashed with her balance, Miriam's stomach churned. All the money was gone, every penny she had, every penny. She froze, staring at the screen as Ivy looked over her shoulder. "Grandma," Ivy's voice was quiet, filled with suspicion. "Is everything okay?" The words felt thick in Miriam's throat. It didn't make sense. Her savings, her retirement fund gone. "Grandma," Ivy said, tugging at her sleeve. "What's wrong? You're scaring me." Miriam felt the air grow heavy around her as the realization sank in. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a technical issue. Someone had drained the account, and the more she thought about it, the more she realized who could have done it. Lily, her daughter. Miriam felt the sharp pang of betrayal, deep and cold. Her daughter, Lily, had access to her accounts. She was an authorized user for emergencies. But Miriam never imagined Lily would betray her like this, especially not after everything they had been through. But it wasn't just the money. Miriam's mind flicked back to the signs she had ignored, the subtle unease she had felt when Lily began dating that man, Ethan Graves. The way he always seemed too perfect, too charming. The way he asked too many questions about their finances. Miriam had brushed it off, thinking it was just her overprotectiveness. Now, standing at the ATM, her heart pounded in her chest as everything started to connect. Ivy's voice brought her back to the present. "Grandma, who took the money?" "I think I know who did it, Ivy," Miriam said, her voice barely a whisper. She felt the tightness in her chest, the weight of the truth crashing down on her. Her daughter had stolen everything, and she had done it with Ethan. They hadn't just left. They had taken the money and disappeared. Miriam's hand clenched into a fist as the overwhelming sense of betrayal washed over her. Ivy's face was still filled with concern, but there was a sharpness in her gaze now, a clarity that spoke of someone who had already started piecing things together in her own way. "I knew something was wrong with him," Ivy said, her voice small but determined. "Mom told me not to worry about him, but I didn't like him either." Miriam nodded, feeling her chest tighten. "We need to find her, Ivy, and we need to get the truth. Are we going to call the police? Ivy asked, her eyes scanning the streets as though looking for an answer herself. Miriam shook her head slowly. The police won't help. Not yet. They'll just think your mom left us. But I don't think she ran away. I think something much worse is happening. As they walked home, Miriam's mind raced. She had worked in accounting for decades, and she knew when something didn't add up. This wasn't just a simple case of theft. Something larger, something darker was at play. Ethan was no ordinary boyfriend, and Miriam was determined to get to the bottom of it. They had a family to save. The next morning, Miriam couldn't shake the weight of what had happened. She had barely slept, her mind running on an endless loop of questions, doubts, and a growing sense of dread. How could Lily, her own daughter, have done this to her? And why? What was Ethan really after? Miriam sat at her kitchen table, the smell of stale coffee in the air, while Ivy worked quietly across from her, her fingers tapping swiftly on the keyboard of her laptop. Ivy was an exceptional student, a natural when it came to computers. Miriam had always marveled at her granddaughter's talent. Now, it was that same talent that would help them figure out what had really happened. I'll start looking through Lily's social media, Ivy said without looking up, her voice calm but focused. She's been posting a lot lately. Maybe we can find some clues. Miriam nodded, though she wasn't sure what Ivy would find. But Ivy was right, this wasn't just about the money. It was about understanding what had led to Lily's sudden disappearance and why she had taken everything with her. There had to be more to it. I'll check the bank statements again, Miriam muttered to herself, but Ivy interrupted her. Grandma, I think I found something. Miriam quickly pushed aside her half-empty coffee mug and leaned over Ivy's shoulder, trying to make sense of the information on the screen. Ivy's eyes were fixed, scanning rapidly through posts, comments, and photographs. This, Ivy paused, her voice dropping slightly. This isn't right. Look at this. Lily's been posting about some guy named Marcus. She's tagging him in photos, talking about how excited she is to meet him. But there's something strange about these posts. Miriam squinted at the screen, her heart sinking. Marcus. Ethan Graves. He wasn't just Ethan. His real name was Marcus, and the connection felt too sinister to ignore. Ivy clicked on a few more links, pulling up images of a man Miriam didn't recognize. The man in the photos wasn't someone Lily had ever mentioned before. Look, Ivy said, pointing at the dates. Lily posted about Marcus a month ago, but the posts are starting to disappear. It's like she's erasing traces of him. Miriam's chest tightened. Do you think she was hiding something from us? I think she was hiding from him, Ivy replied quietly. Grandma, look at this. Ivy scrolled through the comments, and Miriam's eyes narrowed as she read what others had written. It was clear now, Marcus was not a boyfriend, not in the way Miriam had thought. There were comments about Marcus that made Miriam's stomach twist. He's not who you think he is, Rachel. He'll take everything you have. He's bad news, stay away from him. But there were also hints that something darker was going on, something far worse than just a conman. People were warning Lily, but she had ignored them. Miriam's hand trembled as she picked up her phone, dialing the number for her daughter's bank. She knew she had to investigate the transactions further. But before she could speak to anyone, a new thought crossed her mind. What if Lily wasn't acting on her own? Miriam said aloud, mostly to herself. Ivy glanced at her, confusion evident in her expression. What do you mean? Miriam hesitated. What if this Marcus guy... What if he's pulling the strings? What if he's using Lily, manipulating her? He could have been the one draining the account, not her. Ivy's eyes widened. Like controlling her. You think he made her steal the money? I think he might have, and now I need to figure out how deep this goes. Ivy began typing again, pulling up articles and searching deeper into Marcus's online presence. Miriam, feeling the urgency now, gathered the bank documents. As her granddaughter worked tirelessly, Miriam's mind swirled with dread. She needed answers, and she needed them fast. After a few moments, Ivy paused, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. "Grandma, this isn't just about your money." Miriam looked up sharply. "What do you mean? Look at this." Ivy turned the screen to face her. There, in black and white, was a news article dated 2 years ago, reporting a string of disappearances across Ohio, all involving young women who had vanished without a trace. But the eerie part? The dates matched perfectly. Every single one of those women had been connected to a man named Marcus Graves, Ethan's real identity. Miriam's blood ran cold. This wasn't just a case of betrayal. This wasn't just about stolen money. This was something far more dangerous. Her daughter had unknowingly, or maybe knowingly, become entangled with a criminal network that had been operating under their noses for years. And now, it seemed, they had her daughter. "We need to call the police," Miriam said, her voice cracking with resolve. Ivy looked up at her, hesitating. "They won't believe us, Grandma. We have no proof, and they'll just think Lily ran off with her boyfriend." Miriam nodded, her expression hardening. "We're not waiting for them. We need to do this ourselves." The next few hours were a blur of action. Ivy and Miriam scoured every online trace they could find on Marcus and his criminal associates. They discovered that Marcus wasn't alone in this. There was a network, an entire web of people, each playing a role in the trafficking scheme. Miriam had seen her fair share of financial scams, but this was something far darker than anything she had ever encountered. The urgency of the situation weighed heavily on Miriam's chest. The money was gone. Lily was gone. But what terrified her most was the thought that if she didn't act fast, she might never see her daughter again. Ivy broke the silence with a quiet voice. "Grandma, I think I found a clue." Miriam turned sharply. "What is it?" Ivy pulled up a message that had been hidden in a thread, a comment buried deep among others. It was from someone named Jennifer, who had written, "Marcus took everything from me too. He won't stop until he gets what he wants. He's dangerous." Miriam's heart dropped into her stomach. This wasn't just about money. This was something far worse. Marcus wasn't just a thief. He was a predator. "We're going to find her, Ivy," Miriam said, more determined than ever. "We're going to find your mother, and we're going to make sure no one else falls victim to him again." But as Miriam's fingers tightened around the edge of her chair, the truth settled in. They were no longer just hunting for a missing person. They were hunting a monster, and they had to be smart if they wanted to bring him down. The clock was ticking. The following day dawned gray and heavy, a thin mist clinging to the windows of Miriam's small suburban home. She hadn't slept much. Her mind kept looping through numbers, transactions, and the haunting thought of Lily walking into danger with Ethan or Marcus, or whatever his real name was. But it wasn't Miriam who made the first move that morning. It was Ivy. The girl shuffled into the kitchen in her oversized hoodie, laptop already tucked under her arm. She set it down on the table, the screen lighting up with dozens of tabs. Miriam raised an eyebrow. "You've been up all night." "Couldn't sleep," Ivy answered simply, pushing her messy hair out of her face. "Besides, I found something." Miriam sipped her cold coffee, leaning in. Ivy's voice was calm, but her words were razor sharp. "Ethan Graves doesn't exist. Not online. No birth records, no tax filings, no property records under that name. But I traced his face through image search. Grandma. He's gone by at least 4 different names across different states. Ethan Graves, Jason Cross, Mark Holland, and Marcus Trent. And every time, women around him disappeared. Miriam's stomach twisted. "You're telling me he's done this before?" Ivy clicked through the tabs. Each one showed a missing woman. The timeline was chilling. Dayton, 2027, Columbus, 2028, Pittsburgh, early 2029. Same story every time. He meets a single woman, drains her savings, then she vanishes. And the police always said the same thing. She left voluntarily. Miriam clenched her fists. Because that's the easiest explanation. They never looked deeper. Exactly, Ivy said. But here's the weird part, look at the patterns. She pulled up a digital chart she had built overnight, colored dots marking dates and locations. Every woman disappears after about 3 to 4 months. Mom has been with him for almost exactly that long. Miriam leaned closer, her pulse quickening. Which means Mom is next, Ivy whispered. The words struck like a hammer. Miriam felt her throat tighten, but she forced herself to stay composed. She'd dealt with liars and fraudsters her whole life in corporate investigations. She wasn't about to collapse now, not when her daughter's life was on the line. We're not going to let that happen, Miriam said firmly. But we'll need evidence, something undeniable. Ivy nodded, already typing. I can trace the bank transfers more deeply, maybe figure out where the money went after it hit Mom's account. They worked side by side for hours, Miriam pulling out old notebooks and scribbling patterns like she was back in her office, and Ivy flying across the keyboard with the speed of someone who had grown up breathing the internet. Then came the breakthrough. Grandma, Ivy said suddenly, her voice trembling with both fear and excitement. Look at this. The transfers from your account went into Mom's, but then, within 2 hours, they were rerouted to another account. Guess whose name it's under? Miriam's breath caught. Marcus. Not Marcus, Anna Fields. Miriam froze. Our neighbor Anna. The woman who always smiled from her porch, who brought over pies during the holidays, who once watched Ivy when Miriam was at the doctor. Ivy spun the laptop toward her. Yes. Same name, same birth date, and she's listed as an intermediary account holder. Grandma, she's not just a nosy neighbor. She's working with him. The betrayal cut deep, sharper than Miriam expected. Anna had been a part of their little world for years, but now the truth was impossible to ignore. Miriam's jaw set. This isn't just a man and my daughter anymore. This is a network, and if Anna's in it, that means they've been watching us for a long time. Ivy looked at her with eyes far older than her age. So what do we do? Miriam straightened her back, her voice steady. We hunt them before they hunt us. We'll find where they're keeping your mother, and we'll bring her back. And in that moment, under the dim kitchen light, grandmother and granddaughter silently agreed. They were no longer just victims. They were investigators. The hunt had begun. The plan was simple, lure Marcus into a trap. But Miriam knew that nothing involving a criminal this dangerous would ever be simple. It had been a week since Miriam and Ivy uncovered the truth about Anna Fields. A week filled with late nights, relentless searching, and the steady rise of dread in Miriam's chest. They had everything they needed, except one crucial piece. They had no idea where Marcus and Anna were keeping Lily. That had to change. I've been thinking, Ivy said one morning, sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a series of photos of Marcus, Anna, and the missing women they'd found online. We need to make them think we're vulnerable, like the others they've targeted. We need to look like easy prey. Miriam nodded, glancing at her granddaughter, impressed by her growing confidence. And how do you suggest we do that? Ivy's eyes glinted with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. I can create a fake profile. A single mom, new to the area, looking for someone to trust. It's how they lure women in. We need to bait them. Miriam hesitated for a moment, the weight of the plan settling over her. It wasn't just about playing a dangerous game. It was about putting themselves right in the path of a predator. But Ivy was right. This was the only way to find out where Lily was, to make sure she wasn't already lost. All right, Miriam said firmly, her voice steady. Do it, but we stay in control, no more mistakes. The next few hours were a blur of activity. Ivy spent the afternoon crafting a new identity. She created a Facebook profile for a woman named Lisa Grant, a 34-year-old single mother of an 8-year-old boy, recently moved from Cleveland. The profile was almost identical to Miriam's. Same hometown, similar job background, and just enough detail to make it believable. Ivy even added a few pictures of a smiling woman and child, completely fake, but good enough to lure Marcus's attention. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, Miriam and Ivy were ready. The bait was set. Miriam had been reluctant, but she knew this was the only shot they had. "Okay," Ivy said, her fingers moving swiftly across the keyboard. "We're live. I just sent him a friend request." Miriam couldn't help but feel a deep pit in her stomach. What if this backfires? What if he figures it out before we're ready? The first message came within minutes. It was from Marcus. "Hey, Lisa. I don't usually connect with strangers, but you look like someone who's been through a lot. I know how hard life can be, especially when you have a little one to take care of. If you ever want someone to talk to, I'm here." Miriam glanced at Ivy, her heart racing. This was it, the first sign they had that Marcus was taking the bait. "Do you think he'll meet us in person?" Miriam asked quietly, her voice tight with apprehension. Ivy didn't answer immediately. She was watching the screen, analyzing every word of the conversation. Finally, she looked up, her face a mix of determination and wariness. "He wants to, I can tell by how quickly he replied. He's looking for a way to meet, but he's playing it cool. He wants to get comfortable first." Miriam's pulse quickened. We'll let him make the first move. We're not rushing this." The next day, Marcus's messages grew more frequent, more insistent. He seemed eager to make the connection, but always with a veneer of casual friendliness. It wasn't long before he suggested a place to meet. "I know a quiet spot, just the right place for us to talk. A cozy little diner. I promise, no rush, no pressure. Just a place to get to know each other." It was exactly the kind of place they knew Marcus would pick, isolated, unassuming. Perfect for someone trying to manipulate a vulnerable target into a false sense of security. Ivy read the message aloud, her fingers still hovering over the keys. "It's perfect. He's trying to play it smooth, but we have him now. This is it." Miriam's heart pounded in her chest. "We meet him there. We'll have to get him talking, see if we can get a slip, something that gives us a clue about where Lily is." That night, under the cover of darkness, Miriam and Ivy arrived at the diner. It was a small, rundown place on the outskirts of town, the kind of spot you'd miss if you weren't looking for it. The parking lot was nearly empty, save for one sleek black car parked near the back. Miriam took a steadying breath as she and Ivy approached the diner's front door. "Stay close," she said, her voice low. "We don't know who else could be here." Inside, the faint smell of grease and coffee hung in the air. A few patrons sat scattered across the room, but it was quiet, too quiet. Marcus was already seated in a booth at the back, his dark eyes watching them as they walked in. Miriam's stomach twisted as she saw him up close for the first time. His calm demeanor was unsettling, his smile too smooth, too practiced. "Lisa," he greeted warmly, standing up to extend his hand. "I'm Marcus. It's good to finally meet you." Miriam hesitated, then shook his hand. His grip was firm, but there was something off about it, as though he were trying to measure her somehow. As they sat down, Ivy slipped into the seat next to her, her eyes scanning the room. "So, what brings you to this quiet little town?" Marcus asked, his tone casual, but Miriam could see the calculation in his eyes. "I needed a change," Miriam said, adopting the role Ivy had created for her. "A fresh start. I've been through a lot." She could feel his eyes on her like he was waiting for her to drop her guard. "I just want a safe place for my son. He's had enough upheaval." "I get that," Marcus said, his voice softening as though he were trying to soothe her. "The world can be a tough place for a kid, but you don't have to face it alone. I can help with that. I know people who can make things easier for you." Miriam's stomach twisted. So this is how he does it. This is how he traps them. "Really?" Miriam asked, feigning interest. "I don't know anyone here. I don't know who to trust." Marcus leaned in slightly, his voice lowering as if sharing a secret. "You can trust me. I know things, people. I can take care of you. Take care of your son. All you need to do is let me help." Miriam's blood ran cold. How do you plan on doing that? Before Marcus could answer, a soft beep sounded from Miriam's phone. She glanced down to see a message from Ivy. He's trying to control you. He's done this before. We have him. Miriam's heart raced as she realized they were one step away from the truth. Marcus's carefully laid facade was about to crumble. Actually, Marcus, Miriam said, her voice hardening, I think you've said enough. I think you've said just enough to prove what kind of man you really are. The game was over. The trap had been set, and now it was time for Marcus to fall into it. Miriam's words hung in the air, sharp and unyielding, slicing through the false warmth of Marcus's carefully constructed persona. The diner, once quiet and unassuming, suddenly felt like a battleground, an empty stage waiting for the final act to unfold. Marcus's smile faltered, just for a moment, but it was enough to give Miriam the satisfaction of knowing that the calm facade was beginning to crack. He had underestimated them. He had underestimated her. You don't know what you're getting into, Marcus said, his voice suddenly low, dangerous. The warmth in his tone evaporated, replaced by something far colder, far more threatening. I know exactly what I'm getting into, Miriam replied, her voice steady, unwavering. She sat up straighter, the weight of the situation pressing down on her with renewed intensity. I know about the women you've used, the lives you've destroyed, and I know exactly what you've done to my daughter. Marcus's eyes flickered with something dangerous. It was a flash of recognition, a brief spark of panic that quickly masked itself with calculated indifference. He leaned back in his seat, crossing his arms, trying to regain control of the conversation. You're wasting your time, he said with a sneer. You think you're some kind of hero, some kind of savior. You're just as much a victim as the rest of them. You don't know anything about me or the people I work with. Maybe not, Miriam said, her eyes narrowing. But I know enough to know that you're about to make a very big mistake. Ivy, who had been sitting quietly beside her, watching the exchange with the intensity of someone who had long understood the stakes, now spoke up. Her voice was calm, calculated, every word laced with the quiet confidence that had been growing inside her since they'd begun this journey. You're wrong, Ivy said, her eyes never leaving Marcus's face. You're not the one in control here anymore. You're not the one calling the shots. For a moment, Marcus looked at Ivy as though he had just noticed her presence. His expression shifted, his gaze hardening as he turned his focus onto her. Your granddaughter has a big mouth, Marcus said, sneering at Ivy. Just like your daughter. Ivy didn't flinch. You can keep talking, but it's not going to save you. We've been watching you. We've been following your trail, and now we're done. Marcus's eyes darted toward the exit, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. It was only a momentary crack, but it was enough for Miriam to see it. He was nervous. He knew his time was running out. Suddenly, the door to the diner opened with a creak, and Miriam's heart skipped a beat. Two men stepped inside, dressed in dark jackets, their presence a stark contrast to the otherwise quiet setting. One of them, a tall man with a stoic expression, walked straight toward their booth. Miriam knew instantly they weren't here for a casual meal. Marcus, the man said, his voice firm and commanding. It's over, you're coming with us. Marcus's eyes widened, and for the first time genuine panic flashed across his face. He stood quickly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. No, he spat, his voice trembling with anger and fear. You don't know who I am. You have no idea who you're dealing with. The second man, shorter but no less imposing, stepped forward, his hand resting on the handle of a gun beneath his jacket. We know exactly who you are, Marcus, and we know exactly what you've been doing. Ivy and Miriam exchanged a quick glance, then stood as one, the realization settling in. This wasn't just a confrontation between them and Marcus. This was the beginning of something much larger. The authorities had been tracking Marcus and his network for months, and now, at last, they had him cornered. Marcus, realizing his options were dwindling, made a desperate move. With a swift motion, he reached into his jacket, pulling out a small knife. He lunged toward Miriam, but before he could get close, the taller man was on him, his hand grabbing Marcus's wrist and twisting it sharply. The knife clattered to the floor, useless. "You're not going anywhere," the tall man said, his voice cold. He took out a pair of handcuffs and quickly snapped them onto Marcus's wrists, the finality of the gesture almost poetic. Miriam stood frozen for a moment, her breath catching in her chest. The danger had been real, so real that she could still feel the adrenaline rushing through her veins. But now, as the handcuffs clicked into place, a wave of relief washed over her. Marcus struggled against the two men, but it was pointless. His empire of manipulation, deceit, and terror was finally crumbling. "Let's go," the taller man said to Marcus, giving him a firm shove toward the exit. The second man followed closely behind, ensuring Marcus didn't try anything else. As the door swung shut behind them, silence descended on the diner once more. Miriam let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding, her hands still shaking. She looked down at Ivy, who was watching the door with a quiet intensity, her expression unreadable. "We did it," Ivy said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "We actually did it." Miriam nodded, a sense of finality settling over her. "Yes, we did." But as they stood there, watching the police car drive off with Marcus in the back, Miriam couldn't shake the feeling that the real battle was only just beginning. Marcus might be behind bars, but there were still others out there. His network was vast, and it was only a matter of time before the full extent of his operation came to light. For now, though, they had won. They had saved Lily, and in doing so, they had done something far greater than just stop a criminal. They had stopped a cycle of abuse, of manipulation, and they had given hope to the women Marcus had once preyed upon. "We need to get to Lily," Miriam said, her voice steady but urgent. "She's still out there, and we still have a job to do." Ivy looked up at her, the spark of determination in her eyes. "Let's go." And just like that, Miriam knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. They had already faced the worst of it, and they had come out on top. Nothing could stop them now. 2 weeks had passed since Marcus was arrested, but for Miriam and Ivy, the time felt like a blur. One long stretch of waiting, paperwork, and unanswered questions. Yet, amid the chaos and fear, there had been moments of peace, fleeting but important. The sound of the wind rustling through the trees outside their home, the quiet hum of their daily routine, the sight of Ivy curled up on the couch with a book, no longer burdened by the weight of what they had been through. Lily was home now. The reunion had been everything Miriam could have hoped for, and nothing like she had imagined. Her daughter was no longer the woman she remembered. The last few weeks had changed her, as they had changed Miriam. Lily had seen too much, felt too much. But when they embraced, when Miriam held her tightly, it was as if a piece of the past fell back into place. "I'm sorry," Lily had whispered that night, her voice cracked with exhaustion and regret. "I never wanted you to be involved in any of this." Miriam simply held her, her heart full, but with no words to express the depth of what she was feeling. The past couldn't be undone, but they were here together. That was enough. Now, as the sun began to set on another calm evening, Miriam sat outside on the porch with Ivy. The house was still quiet, just the occasional chirp of crickets and the rustling of leaves. Miriam looked at Ivy, her granddaughter, the one who had been her rock, her unexpected hero in all of this. "I never thought I'd be proud of someone so young," Miriam said, her voice soft, thoughtful. Ivy glanced at her with a small smile. "I couldn't have done it without you, Grandma. You were the one who didn't give up." Miriam chuckled. "Maybe, but you, Ivy, you showed me that we can all learn something new. You taught me that even when everything seems out of control, there's always a way to fight back." Ivy's eyes softened, and she nodded, looking out at the horizon. I'm just glad we got her back. I didn't want to lose her, too. Miriam reached out and took Ivy's hand, squeezing it gently. You didn't. You saved her. You saved all of us. They sat in silence for a moment, watching the sky change color. The world felt right again, even though Miriam knew the scars of what they'd been through would linger. They would have to heal slowly, but they were strong, stronger than they had ever been. As they sat together, Miriam thought of all the women who had been victims of Marcus's manipulations, all the lives he had ruined. She thought of Jennifer Walsh and the others who had disappeared without a trace. But for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel powerless. Marcus's network was far-reaching, but now the authorities were investigating every lead. Marcus's capture had been just the beginning. There were more arrests to come, more lives to save. She looked at Ivy, her heart full of pride. Her granddaughter had been the one to connect the dots, to bring the truth to light. Ivy had helped bring down a criminal empire, not just through intelligence and courage, but through heart. What's next, Grandma? Ivy asked, her voice curious but calm. Miriam paused, thinking for a moment. Next, we heal, we move forward, we take one day at a time. Ivy smiled, squeezing Miriam's hand in return. And maybe we help more people along the way. Miriam smiled back, her eyes twinkling with the same strength that had carried her through everything. That sounds like a good plan. As the stars began to peek through the deepening sky, Miriam knew that they had faced the worst of what life had thrown at them, and they had emerged stronger, united, and ready to embrace whatever came next. Together, they could face anything. And this, she realized, was their real victory.